He was a Nobel Peace Prize winner who helped end the Cold War. Yet, in his own country, he's often seen as the man who brought down an empire. So today, we're going to unpack the two very different legacies of Mikhail Gorbachev.
To the West, he's this legendary figure, a hero who helped pull the world back from a very dangerous brink. But if you go to Russia, the memory is just different. It's all colored by the absolute chaos that came after he left power.
So how do we square that circle? How can one man be a savior to millions of millions and a failure to millions of others? To get it, we really have to go back and look at the Soviet Union he inherited, a superpower that was, frankly, rotting from the inside.
When Gorbachev took power in 1985, he wasn't just becoming a leader. He was taking the reins of this massive, stagnant, and deeply repressive system that a lot of people thought was just completely beyond repair.
This was a place held together by secret police and strict censorship. Gorbachev looked at all this and knew it just couldn't last. He believed the only way to save the system was to radically change it. And his plan came down to two famous transformative ideas.
First, there was Glasnost, which means openness. Now, this was huge. For the first time in generations, this policy let people actually speak their minds, criticize the government, and get real information without being terrified. It was a total teardown of state censorship.
And the second piece was Perestroika, or restructuring. This was his ambitious plan to overhaul the whole government and the economy. The goal was to bring in some market principles and, as the policy said, to give full freedom to human initiative. And these new policies, well, they didn't stay contained within the Soviet Union. They immediately had this world-changing effect on the global stage. And this is really the foundation of his heroic legacy in the West. Just think about how fast everything happened. In just a handful of years, the entire world order was redrawn. He started talking with the US about getting rid of nuclear weapons, and then, and this was crucial, he refused to use Soviet tanks to prop up the communist governments in Eastern Europe, which led to their peaceful collapse. Western leaders couldn't believe it. They quickly realized this guy was different. Even before he officially took over, the British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, famously said he was a man she could do business with. He wasn't like the old guard. He was someone you could actually talk to.
And so, in 1990, for his role in ending the decades-long Cold War basically without a major shot being fired, the world gave him the Nobel Peace Prize.
But here's the turn. While the rest of the world was celebrating this new era of freedom, back home, Gorbachev's reforms were unleashing forces that he just couldn't control anymore.
See, here's the thing you have to get about Gorbachev. He was a reformer, not a revolutionary. His goal was always to save the Soviet Union, to make it better, not to destroy it. But when you loosen an iron grip that's been in place for decades, you also unleash all these forces that were simmering just below the surface. And those forces quickly spiraled way beyond his control.
All this chaos created a power vacuum, and his number one rival, Boris Yeltsin, jumped right in. While Gorbachev was trying to change things gradually, Yeltsin basically positioned himself as the guy who was ready to just tear the whole thing down, the terminator of the old system.
In the end, well, it came incredibly fast. Communist hardliners, terrified of a total collapse, tried to stage a coup and get rid of Gorbachev. The coup actually failed, but the man who emerged as the hero wasn't Gorbachev. It was Yeltsin, who famously stood on a tank and defied them. Gorbachev came back, but his authority was completely gone.
And this right here is why the memory of Gorbachev is so painful inside Russia. For so many people, the freedom he talked about was totally overshadowed by the chaos that came next. The 1990s were just a decade of incredible economic pain, rising crime, and this really humiliating loss of national pride. Which, of course, brings us right back to our big question. How do we make sense of these two completely opposite verdicts of history?
In the end, it really is all about perspective. Your view of Gorbachev's legacy pretty much depends entirely on where you were standing. Did you benefit from the Cold War ending, or did you pay the price for the Soviet Union collapsing?
But his story didn't just end in 1991. After he was out of power, he spent the next 30 years working on the things he believed in. He created foundations that focused on everything from nuclear disarmament to environmental security, and even provided critical support for children's hospitals. Ultimately, Gorbachev opened a door for his country, a door to freedom and to hope. But that freedom came with the costs that many Russians still feel to this day. So was he a hero or was he a failure? Maybe the real answer is that he was both. And, as this quote says, perhaps the final judgment on his incredibly complicated legacy is still waiting to be written.